Hello, welcome to Prajim Technologies. I am Venkat. This is part 27 of ASP.NET video series. In this session, we'll learn about the ASP.NET radio button list control. Before continuing with the session, I strongly recommend to watch parts 24, 25, and 26 of this video series. In ASP.NET, there are several list controls like drop-down list, checkbox list, bulleted list, list box, and radio button list. We have spoken about drop-down list, checkbox list, and list box in the previous sessions of this video series. So just like every other list control, a radio button list is also a collection of list item objects. Items can be added to the radio button list in the HTML source at design time or in the code behind file at runtime. Radio button list, like any other list control, supports data binding. For example, a radio button list can be bound to a database table or an XML file. In the previous sessions of this video series, we have actually seen how to bind a drop-down list to an XML file and to a database table. So we exactly bind the radio button list also in the similar way. Checkbox list is generally used when we want to present the user with multiple choices from which we want him or her to select one or more options. But then if you want to restrict the user to select only one option, then we can make use of a radio button list. That is, if we want to present the user with mutually exclusive choices, then radio button list should be used. Let's look at some of the useful properties of a radio button list control. Most of these properties are actually very similar to a checkbox list control, especially the repeat direction, repeat columns, and repeat layout properties. Let's flip to Visual Studio. Let's drag and drop a radio button list control. And we know that just like any other list control, a radio button list control is also a collection of list item objects, and these list item objects can be added in the HTML source or programmatically. So let's use this radio button list to display a list of favorite colors. Okay, and I want the user to select only one favorite color. And by default, if you look at this, the items are arranged in vertical layout. If you want to change that to horizontal layout, then we can make use of repeat direction property. By default, the repeat direction is vertical. So if we change that to horizontal, the items are arranged in a horizontal layout. And then we have this repeat columns, and again this is very similar to a checkbox list control. By default it's 0, which means all the list items are shown in one column, but if I want them to be spread across two columns, I can change that to 2, and they are spread across two columns now. Let's put it back to 0. Okay, another interesting property is the table, repeat layout property. And if you look at this property, it takes 4 values: table, flow, unordered list, and ordered list. Let's look at each of them. Now by default, the repeat layout is table. And if I run this as it stands, what's going to happen, if you look at this, there are 4 colors here, which meaning 4 radio button list items. If I right click on this web form and then view source, okay, look at the HTML that is generated. Now we are actually using here a table to display these radio button lists. Okay, and the reason why it's doing that is because you have set the repeat layout to use table. Okay, on the other hand, if I set that to flow, and if I run this, what's going to happen, it doesn't use the table if you view the HTML source. So right click, view source, look at that, it's not using the table now to present these radio buttons. Okay, so the other options that we have are unordered list. Let's pin this down. So unordered list. Now look at this. The moment I change this to unordered list, I'm going to get an error. So there was an error rendering the control. The unordered list and ordered list layouts only support vertical layout, which means in the repeat direction, you have to set that to vertical to use this unordered list and ordered list repeat layouts. Okay, so unordered list, the name says it's an unordered list which shows the bulleted point. So if we run this now, these radio button list items will be generated along with that bullets there. If you want numbers instead of bullets, then I just use ordered list. So now if we run this, obviously, as you can see here, it's rendering the numbers. Okay, but keep in mind the ordered list and unordered list repeat layout can be used only when the repeat direction is vertical. Okay, let's put this back to table and let's change the repeat direction to horizontal. Alright, so now let's do a quick demo, where we select these radio buttons and then I want to view the text value and index. And this is very much similar to a drop-down list, because if you remember, in a drop-down list you can select only one item, and the same is the case with a radio button list. You can select only one item from the radio button list. Okay, so obviously if you are able to select only one item, there's no point in looping through each list item object within the radio button list. All you can do to select the text value and index, you can use the selected item property and selected index property of the radio button list. Okay, so let's drag and drop a button. So whenever I click this button, we want to retrieve the selected item text value and index. And how do we do that? Response.write. So text is equal to radio button list 1 dot selected item dot text. And if you remember from the previous sessions of this video series, if the user has not selected any item, then the selected item, when you try to retrieve the text property of the selected item, when it is null, then a null reference exception will be thrown. So to avoid that, you can actually check if the selected item is not null. Or you can also use radio button list 1 dot selected index not equal to -1. We have talked about that when we were discussing about list box control. Okay, so we have the text, we want the value and the index. So the value is equal to radio button 1 list 1 dot selected item dot value, and if we want the index, dot selected index, since that is an integer, let's use toString method to convert that to string. And to have this properly displayed when it renders on the page, put an HTML break there. Alright, so now if we run this, as you might expect, when we click that button, it will show us the selected items text value. Okay, so red. On the other hand, if I select, look at that, as soon as I select the radio button, it clears the other one which is already selected. That's because radio button selections are mutually exclusive. Okay, fine. Now let's say I want to uncheck this. I selected this option, but I don't want to select any of these options, and I want to simply don't want to select any of these radio buttons. Now, is that possible? No. The only way to make that possible is run the page once again, or navigate away from that page and navigate to that page back. You will have them unselected. Okay, but then on the page, is there a way, once if I select it, there's no way I can select that, but we can do that programmatically. Probably we can provide them with a button control, and then they can click that button to remove all the selections. So if you look at this one, there is a button called clear selection, and this is going to clear all the selections that you made. So let's program that now. So let's drag and drop a button control onto the web form, and let's change the text of that one to clear selection. Okay, double click that, the event handler gets generated. Now again, keep in mind, to clear the selection, the easiest way is radio button list 1 dot selected index is equal to -1. And there are a lot of people, I have seen a lot of articles on the internet, people actually looping through each list item. They lot of people does this for each list item. Li in radio button list 1 dot item, so they loop through each list item, and then they say if li dot selected, then what they do is li dot selected is equal to false. Do we really have to write so much of code? Now with this kind of a code there are two problems. One, it's more code. Two, you're unnecessarily looping through each list item object. Okay, so the best way is to simply set the selected index to -1. No matter which item the user has selected, the moment you set the selected index to -1, it's not going to select anything within that radio button list. So let's run this now and see in action if it's working as expected. Okay, I select that, click this button, okay, green my selection, and then the moment I click clear my selection, look at that, nothing is selected there. On this slide, you can find resources for ASP.NET C# and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.